Lime-flavored invaders, this is internet personality Vangelus, and Mecha Invasion is a new kid on the unofficial transforming robot toy block, who blasted onto the scene with not one, but two beefy toys in one brickish box. Loader and Mixer are the heralds of a familiar-looking sextet of fusion-friendly construction comrades, but there's one big twist and a few refreshing spritzes throughout this debut experience. Loader is a payloader, Mixer is a cement mixer. Hopefully, this is not terribly shocking. I don't know my makes or models, but both of these alt modes look the part, featuring bold angles, sharp ridges, and a very tart pale lime base hue. While they aren't heavily weathered, Loader and Mixer do have very clean paint apps, be they hazard striping, silver pops and details, or even little greebly text bits about something called the Giant Legion. I have one single blemish on one letter on one side of Mixer, but otherwise the paintwork is totally up to par. By the way, that tank on Mixer is die-cast metal, as are the shinier piston-looking things on the hinges of Loader's payloader scoopy loader thing. Those things, the piston-looking ones, by the way, are part of a ratcheted joint system that gives Loader full payloader functionality on his pushy scoopy deal. Mixer doesn't have a vehicle gimmick, he just leaves me a bit confused as to how big his long nose cab actually is in comparison to the little ladder on his rear. Generally speaking, these guys give an older Voyager vibe in their size, measuring rather large and likely fitting in with Masterpiece-esque stuff if you aren't terribly picky about animation models. They also have rubberized and textured tires on all of their wheels, providing a firm roll feel and making me think these things are more on the long-living silicone side of the toy tire gradient. I don't actually know what they're made of, but it feels nice right now in early 2025. Loader is going to illustrate where the magic really kicks in on these guys. His transformation is a pleasure to bury the lead, because he is chunkily using his vehicle mode shapes to form robot mode shapes. The hydraulic ratchet joints are his knees, because that entire system is made of his legs. The rear vehicle hunk simply unfolds to become his arms. And it all just works! Satisfyingly tactile with a flow that has had me run through this process well over 20 times by the time you're seeing this. And the way the head not only lives in the cockpit, but rides a spinal reshape in order to lock down atop the torso is a silent chef kiss, as far as I'm concerned. As for Mixer, he front-loads his joy horizon with a leg transformation that crescendos up a hill of dopamine hits to reshape the long-nose cab into an entire lower body without any major complexity or parts collision. If it moves, you just move it. That isn't to say that the upper body's conversion scheme is markedly poor in comparison, it just doesn't have such a pleasant slope of enjoyment. It's still quite straightforward while still delivering my needed chain of satisfaction, making both of these guys a joy to transform one after the other. If some pastiche of the Unicron trilogy and the early days of slavish, devoid, unofficial transforming robot design mixed themselves together and simmered for nearly a decade, then they found a way back to the surface because these hefty and firm Constructaboys, bold and bedecked in a swathe of lush purples and obvious vehicle mass, feel like some kind of long-lost and marinated secret recipe. Loader is the star of the show, living as a literal reverse scrapper type with powerfully bucketed feet at the base of his strong and slender silhouette. The sheer raw texture of his chest is plenty to behold all at once, but Loader's entire body is just a well-realized Constructicon-coded robot from every angle who's got some damn legs. The sheens of the metallics contrast delightfully against the flats of the greens, and the head sculpt speaks Scrapper in its face while hinting more of a rounded Devastator skull pattern in its upper half. Loader has a double-barreled handgun, and while it does seat solidly in his fist hole, it clicks into place after some resistance, and then equally resists coming back out. I am not entirely sure why, but it also hasn't really gotten in the way, it just feels weird. Mixer has many of Loader's basic qualities, wearing his own decently textured torso and showing off the same interplay of metallics against flats. He is very much a Mixmaster type, though. He has a drum as a backpack, wheels on his outer arms, and a very angular forehead crest atop his cranials. However, the basic silhouette of his legs wears a set of folded truck cab details that simply look wild to me whenever I give them an eyeballing. It's such a cool way to get creative with the line art of a guy that is usually just a bunch of green and purple blocks. Mixer has a weapon of his own, much more smooth to peg into his fist holes, and bearing the same suspiciously shiny tip as Loader's weapons barrels. These two feature a simple and delightful electronic feature, by the way. Magnetically activated eye lights. Need a magnet? There's one in each suspiciously shiny gun barrel. Need a battery? They're not only included, but individually bagged in the box. The electronic briquettes that go into Loader and Mixer's heads are individually bagged too. It's so kind. I didn't film the installation process, but I'll try for the next pair if you fine folks really want to see it. As you can see, the optic lights are eye-catching. Huh. I guess that makes sense. They've got the size, they've got the transformation, do they have the articulation? Loader kicks off with a ball socket head that does this kind of range, this kind of look-see, this kind of nod. Makes me happy enough. His shoulders fully work. They can T-pose, they get a little bit high, but they can swing, and because the swing is there and the T-pose hinge is back here, it's fairly natural universal movement. The elbows bend very tightly, given that it's still a single hinge. There's a fully functional bicep swivel, and then the fists can also rotate. However, they're kind of stuck. You have to flip this up, rotate it, put it back down if you want to have the Dr. Doom posture. If you want something in between, this block kind of just gets in the way, unfortunately. So it's simple to work with, but one wishes this could, like, slide back just a little bit to make it normal to work with. The waist is quite unimpeded, and then, as a byproduct of something else that he does, it's actually a really delicious ratcheted ab crunch on Loader. Now, the top half of this guy, basically super solid, slightly stunted wrist swivels, and it's unfortunate, but they can still Dr. Doom it. However, he comes with Mixer as well, so Mixer has a lot of the same articulation points, but they don't function quite as well in every case. The head is still solid, even with the drum behind it. There's not that much difficulty getting him to look around or waggle and nod. The shoulders, though, while they can kind of T-pose, and they can swing forwards and backwards. And by kinda, I mean that when you do it, they start to bend backwards a little bit. Trying to use both those joints in tandem is more difficult, because the swinging here and the outward motion here can butt into things pretty easily with the corner here. And then say that you've swung this up and now you want to swing it outwards. No, you gotta actually go down, then outwards like that. You can't just do a natural universal motion like you could on Loader. I'll just remind you of that. So over here you could swing here, then go outwards. So it's just a more natural motion on this guy. Anyway, the bicep swivels still work happily. The elbow still crunches in like real nice and tight on the bend with a single hinge. The wrists do not have any kind of swivel. However, from the transformation, they can hook inwards a bit for those of you who like to add that sort of curvature to your arms. The waist is unimpeded, but while this guy also has a hinge of sorts within his torso, it goes the other way. So this is the locked position. If I were to move this a little bit, you can see he can do that, which is not as helpful. I could see some positions where this could be kind of neat, but you're also opening a hole here, and when the mixer drum is in place, that's about the gist of it. Those who have seen the full function of this guy might even say, could you not do this, and then undo this, and then just swivel the middle joint around? Well, now that sticks out like that. So I mean, maybe it looks okay like this. I just don't like it as much. I don't like this crummy neutral position. So I just, you know, you could do that if you want to. Personally, though, I just prefer the way this fits together, and I live with that. So there's a little bit of something there, but it's just not quite as cool as on Loader. Now, talking about legs, you saw Loader's legs. Actually, here, I'll show you them right now. The beautiful structure of these somewhat unique legs on Loader are bolstered by not only, you know, usable hip skirty things, but the same joints that you heard in the transformation. They're all present here. There's also, you know, this outward joint. There's a fairly functional thigh swivel. When his legs are fully in, it still more or less functions the same as when they're outwards. They get a little bit more thigh swivel outwards when they are splayed open. But also, if you do want to know, he can kick backwards a lot. But yeah, you saw a lot of these joints already, and guess what? They still feel great. That's still a friggin' die-cast piston sculpt. And then, again, from the transformation, his feet, which are super stable because they're very big, they can rotate at the ankle, and they can pivot at the ankle, and they can tilt on a different hinge at the ankle. Put all this together, by the way, before someone goes like, can it do it? Yeah, it can do it, you know, grow up. The combination of all of this stuff and the ab crunch of here means you can get really just S-curved pelvic thrusting standing postures out of Loader. And in case you're curious, even though he's got the huge buckets down here, it's not impossible to get his legs to come very close together for a bit more of a relaxed kind of standing pose, one arm on the hip, just kind of regarding the action and not really leaping into it. So, articulation on Loader is pretty much fantastic in my opinion, outside of the minor quibble of how you have to do that to do that. Is the story the same for Mixer? Well, not really. While he's got ratcheting hips in both directions and thigh swivels, the thigh swivels much more easily find themselves bumping into this hinged butt plate here. And I'll just say, if you try to get his legs together like this, in the attempt at something kind of casual looking, the thigh swivels are all but non-functional now. They are completely locked up, so that's sort of annoying. Also, you have to splay his legs outwards a bit to get them to go backwards because of the aforementioned hingy plate butt that he's got. And it's a shame, because I think if the thigh swivels were simply lower down, this wouldn't be a problem, but then he does that for transformation, so maybe there's just no room for them. Perhaps it could have been just above the knee hinge instead, but the knee hinge does come all the way up here. I see how the flow and cascade effect of physical dimensions led to this point. I just wish it was not so. Because the knees on this guy do bend quite happily. They are inherited from the transformation again, which means you can get nearly a full-on deep crunch on the double hingedness that they do make use of. What happened to vocabulary? And the lower leg transformation I did so adore means you've got unimpeded, if only tilting, in both axes, foot joints. There's no rotation down here, so if you do want to have the toes pointing outwards, as tends to look more dynamically satisfying, you've got to have one click out on the hips to free up the thigh swivels in order to accomplish that. So the poseability on this dude is fine. I wouldn't even call it bad. I just call it very serviceable, if still effective in most cases. It is simply, I think, strictly worse than Loader's. Loader is just... hang on a second. Loader is just reaping the benefits in part of how the legs already transform and having this joint facing the right direction. On Mixer, it simply ain't the case, and whoop, that's not the worst thing in the world, but it does mean that you're not getting, like, the double Loader experience out of these guys. Alright, let me get these two back to vehicle mode. I want to talk about the obvious green elephant in the room, their combiner modes. Mecha Invasion has flipped things around, taking Mixmaster and Scrapper from their usual leg positions, and instead having their lookalikes turn into arms. And as you can see, the transformation process for their limb modes is a damn triumph of simplicity. No spare parts, hands and elbows built into their bodies, and somehow the same simplicity of conversion that made these two such individual joys. The fact that every millimeter of mass on these figures is used so efficiently and smoothly is a heartwarming triumph to my enthusiast heart. And that lays out how I felt as I spent my first day with these two. Warm, and maybe a little fuzzy. Waxing lyrical about bygone things from a prior decade tends to grate on my nerves, but it is really cool to see a pair of heavy creative liberties Constructicon types, loaded with character, easy and satisfying to handle, and priced around 135 Canadian dollars for the pair. There are small points of slop and jank in a corner or two, like Mixer's limited shoulders or Loader's inexplicably buried wrist swivels. My biggest issue with each one is that it can be hard to retrieve Loader's weapon from its very inset storage spot, and Mixer's chest plate sometimes calls for a prizing tool to ungrip it from its robot mode tab. It just bites on there. But on the whole, Mecha Invasion are cooking on a very welcoming wavelength that I am excited to witness flourish. Well, I hope it flourishes. And I assume they're fresh faces to the scene, but who knows? Probably a commenter. Whatever the case, I am incredibly pleased and darn near giddy to experience the remaining 4 team members incoming. Anyway, this has been Internet Personality Vangelus, and did you know I got these two at a flea market? Shouts out to Fun Galaxy for having a set on hand. And big thanks to all my patrons and members for the support that made me feel comfortable diving in on these two. I also bought a pair of really nice little cakes at that flea market from a friendly man named Valentino. If you're able to purchase homemade, locally made confectionaries with your Mecha Invasion guys, then do so. It's a very enriching experience.